Thank you very much for joining me today. We're doing a talk on dementia and brain health. And this is important to me because my dad passed away from Alzheimer's disease. And for a long time, I did not know that there were things that we could do to minimize our risk of dementia. And, even when he was going through the whole process of worsening over time, I had not yet started my functional medicine journey. I was in the emergency department, and I thought, there's really not a whole lot that we can do. But that's not actually true. So I'd like to go through some of the findings of that we've seen through evidence-based research over the years to see what it is that can play a role in um, changing the trajectory of dementia and cognitive health and how we can best um, prepare ourselves for our future and to maximize our own brain health as well. So let me share. Always a challenge for me to start doing this. Okay, here we go. Okay. Now, can you guys, hopefully you guys can see. I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. So your genes are not your destiny. Um, Dementia is quite prevalent out there and it's going to get even more prevalent. So we think that we have around 7 million Americans living with Alzheimer's dementia, and that's just one of the dementias, but the most common one. And this number could grow to 14 million by 2060. After age 55, this number is a little staggering. 4 in 10 adults are likely to develop some form of dementia. 4 in 10, 2 in 5, 1 in 2.5 people. Okay, so chances are you or someone you know will be affected with dementia moving forward. Lots of common types of dementia: Alzheimer's, vascular, Lewy body, frontotemporal, mixed, and Parkinson's disease. I'm really going to focus mostly on Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Those two are the most common types. There's cognitive decline, memory loss. The pathophysiology is a little bit different between the two, but they have similarities. And you'll see as we move forward that the different types of lifestyle factors contribute to all of these in a kind of similar way. So Alzheimer's disease um, is a disease that's where in the pathophysiology you see increasing tau tangles and amyloid beta in the brain. So these, if you think of them as like little gluey bits of residue that just glum up the process and don't allow the brain to function properly. This Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. It's most common 60 to 80% of cases of dementia. And genetics plays a huge role in this. So the ApoE gene, there are 3 different types of ApoE genes. You get one from your mom and one from your dad, and there's an ApoE2, ApoE3, and ApoE4. The If you get an ApoE4 from your mom and an ApoE4 from your dad, that is up to 15 times the risk of the wild type or the most common variant, which is the ApoE3/3. So if you happen to have an E4/E4 ApoE gene, which you can see if you have through genetic testing, you have up to 15 times the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease in your future. But again, genes are not your destiny. So your lifestyle matters, but in my opinion, it's helpful to know if you have the risk because then you can be even more kind of you do the things that need to be done in a proactive way to try to prevent this from developing in the future. So some Alzheimer's disease facts, they have difficulty remembering conversations. Depression is an early symptom. There are issues with communication, judgment, behaviors. And then later on in life, there's difficulty walking, speaking, and swallowing. And people die from pneumonias, infectious diseases, blood clots, things like that. Vascular dementia is a little bit different, but it can present kind of similarly. So vascular dementia is cerebrovascular disease. So if you've heard of mini strokes, mini strokes, and microvascular changes. So when you have issues with little tiny blood vessels, any size of blood vessel, honestly, but you can have issues with the little tiny blood vessels that are not working properly in the brain, and that causes death of neurons at the end of these blood vessels. So it's poor perfusion in the brain, not getting good blood flow, not getting good oxygen, and then portions of the brain die over a period of time. And it worsens and it just adds to itself. It can present very similarly to Alzheimer's disease. The treatment can be a little bit different, but again, lifestyle factors play a big role. So what are these lifestyle factors? So there was a recent article that looked at the evidence behind what are the factors that can decrease your dementia risk, and they came up with these 14 lifestyle factors. And then I'll also add sleep to that. They interestingly did not have sleep in there, but we're going to go through each of these and how it affects dementia and what you can do to minimize your risk. So low education, hearing loss, visual loss, high LDL cholesterol, depression, traumatic brain injury, inactivity, diabetes, smoking, hypertension, obesity, alcohol use, social isolation, and air pollution. So sleep, okay, I mentioned sleep was not in there, but I do want to mention it, and I did talk about this during the sleep group Zoom in the past. But basically, the amyloid beta, which is this protein that gets kind of sticky in the brain and doesn't allow the brain to function properly, it gets washed out of the brain during deep sleep. So that is a part of a time in your cycle, sleep cycle, where the brain cleans itself. And so if you're not getting good deep sleep, then you're not clearing those toxins from the brain. And so getting good sleep is definitely an important thing to do. So if you're having sleep issues, definitely that's something that we need to talk about to improve your long-term health for many reasons, but dementia is just one of them. Okay, so education. What is this all about? So you're going to hear a lot of kind of similarities. So education and the level of education that you achieved really has to do with your cognitive reserve. So this is a resilience to damage. So for example, when you have a full educational experience, your brain has made many neural connections. And as you age, or if you're having issues with Alzheimer's disease or cerebrovascular dementia, picture that these synapses, these connections, these neural connections can get broken. But if you have five, just as an example, 5 or 10 different ways of approaching a problem or answering a question, then if one of those is broken, you can still have enough reserve to be able to continue throughout your daily life. I liked the example of synonyms. So if you have 5 synonyms for a word and you're experiencing some cognitive impairment and you have disrupted one of those synonyms from due to dementia, you still have 4 more. And so you're still able to communicate. And so that's why a lower education level or not having enough cognitive reserve can lead to dementia. So, how do we help ourselves with this? Well, we can certainly enhance our cognitive reserve through activities. And what's interesting is they have to be different. So you can't just always do the crossword puzzle, or you can't always just do Sudoku. It's important to do a variety of them because if you only do one, then you focus on that those uh, neuronal connections, but you're not making a great diverse number of neuronal connections. So different puzzles and games. Reading regularly, you can enhance your vocabulary and critical thinking skills. Learning new skills, such as learning a new language or learning a musical instrument, those absolutely improve your cognitive reserve. And social engagement, so maintaining strong social connections. And so you'll see this coming back with all the other lifestyle factors as well. Hearing and visual loss. So how does this lead to dementia? A couple of ways. One is that when you have hearing and vision loss, your brain has to work harder to be able to make sense of the world, which then can take resources away from other functions. In addition, when you have these, you can be socially isolated. And again, when you are socially isolated, you have decreased engagement, it decreases your mood, and that also has been shown to lead to increased dementia. When you have less stimulation to a part of the brain, that part of the brain diminishes. So if it's not being used, then you lose it. So use it or lose it. So it decreased sensory input reduces the brain activity. And if you're not able to properly see or hear, you will likely be diminished in both your social and your physical activity because of just the limitations. So what's the treatment for that? Make sure you're getting your vision checked, wearing glasses if appropriate, getting hearing aids. You'd be surprised how many people try to resist these things, thinking of them as weaknesses, but honestly, you are helping your brain. So if you find that you're having difficulty hearing, please go see an audiologist, an ENT, and then make sure you keep up with your eye exams. Okay, next, high LDL cholesterol linked to dementia. So the thought is that LDL cholesterol and ApoB containing lipoproteins are atherogenic, which means they form plaques. And increased plaque means decreased blood flow. And so decreased blood flow to the brain will lead to cognitive decline. And in addition, high cholesterol levels independently can increase amyloid plaque formation, and so therefore increasing dementia risk. So how do you manage your LDL cholesterol? Well, I mean, you work with me. It's diet, exercise, and medication. I mean, we always try food first, exercise first, lifestyle factors first. trying to decrease saturated fat intake, improve polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, um, nuts, legumes, polyphenols, increasing exercise activity. And then if those aren't getting your levels to where they need to be, when you feel like you're maxing it out, then we can talk about getting some lipid lowering therapies on board with either statins or some other types of pharmaceuticals. Okay, next we'll talk about depression and dementia. You know, some people talk about this being like a continuum. Um, the mechanisms are actually quite similar. So, depression has been linked with oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, inflammation, and neuroplasticity. So, oxidative stress is damage that's done by free radicals. And this could lead to injury of the neurons and result in neurodegeneration. Mitochondrial dysfunction is when there's low energy supply in the cell, again, decreasing the neuronal function. Inflammation, kind of similar to oxidative stress, again, resulting in neurodegeneration. And neuroplasticity, so decreasing mood, decreases your brain's ability to make these new neural connections. And so, besides the treatment with things like SSRIs or other antidepressive medications, what else can be used to treat this? Well, antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, activities that will boost brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And kind of the best one for that is high-intensity interval training or high-intensity exercise. And mitochondrial biogenesis, so improving your mitochondria. Again, what does that best? Exercise, resistance exercise, aerobic exercise, interval exercise. Other depression therapies, we talked about physical exercise, so other lifestyle interventions, omega-3 fatty acids have been shown to help. Cognitive training. One thing I did not put in here, sauna. Sauna bathing has been shown to be really helpful with depression and also with decreasing Alzheimer's disease risk. You try for a minimum of 4 times a week for 20 minutes at a time, but any amount helps. Pharmacologic treatments, obviously, those will be the SSRIs or other pharmaceuticals that we talked about. There are some novel therapeutics out there. I know Hopkins was doing a study on psychedelics and depression, ketamine and depression. I think that the jury's still out on those, but that's only because the science is really early. So we'll keep our eye out for that one. And hormonal therapies like making sure your thyroid hormone is your thyroid hormones are appropriately balanced, as are your sex steroids and hormones. Okay. Hypertension as another risk factor. So obviously having an elevated blood pressure is not good to blood vessels in general. It causes hardening of the arteries, damage to the blood vessels, which can then lead to decreased blood flow to the brain. And it can lead to small bleeds in the brain, which leads to chronic small vessel disease, which also leads to this vascular dementia that we talked about. How do we manage hypertension? Lifestyle-wise, obviously medications are important while lifestyle is being addressed. But diet, it's going to seem really like I'm doing this saying it over and over and over again, but whole food, plant strong, reducing salt intake, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, physical activity, trying to make sure that your weight is optimized, Stress reduction is really important because the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest nervous system, as opposed to the sympathetic, which will drive your blood pressure up. And limiting alcohol and quitting smoking. Okay, moving on, obesity. What I find interesting is that obesity is listed here as something separate, even though a lot of these are related, like obesity and diabetes, for example, which is coming up, or obesity and hypertension. But again, pretty similar pathophysiology. You have inflammation. So excess abdominal fat will produce inflammatory cytokines. And these cytokines, inflammation in one part of the body results in inflammation in other parts of the body. So if you have inflammation from having excess body fat, that doesn't just affect, your blood, it affects your brain. Insulin resistance. So having obesity makes you resistant to insulin, and the brain is it usually needs a lot of glucose to stay active and healthy. And if there is a dysregulation in glucose metabolism, that will have brain effects as well. And then vascular health, same thing that we talked about before, hardening of the arteries, hormonal changes. When you have excess adipose tissue, then you have increased levels of cortisol as well, which is a stress hormone. And so that stress hormone can lead to memory impairment and cognitive decline. And then lipid metabolism, we already talked about how LDL cholesterol leads to dementia, and obesity and hypercholesterolemia don't always go hand in hand, but for the most part they do. Okay, so alcohol. Alcohol is a direct neurotoxin. Heavy drinking will absolutely lead to cognitive impairments, brain damage, issues with mental health, as well as neurotransmitter disruption. It doesn't take much alcohol to cause this to happen. So there are guidelines for moderate alcohol consumption. For women, they'll say up to 1 drink per day, and men up to 2 drinks per day. But the reality is it's a continuum. So having less is better for your brain, and having more is worse. And yes, red wine has polyphenols in it. People have talked about that with cardiovascular disease, but it really takes a lot of polyphenols to make a difference. And if you're having enough wine to have all the polyphenols, now you're having also too much alcohol. So it really is not even though it's super tasty, it's not a really great way to look at it. You're not drinking for your brain health. It's the opposite. So trying to minimize alcohol is super helpful. Okay. Social isolation. So similarly to what we talked about before with the cognitive resilience, when people are socially isolated, they do not have as much input from their surroundings, from interactions with others. And this will decrease the size of the brain. It will result in depression, and we already talked about how depression affects brain health as well. Lack of emotional support and decreased physical activity. So people who are socially isolated might be less likely to go for a walk or engage in other physical activity. So again, all of these play they all interact in a very similar way. So, how can you help yourself with this? Join clubs or groups, maybe volunteer. Try to maintain family ties. Even use technology. Technology is not great, but it is when you're, if you're socially isolated, to at least connect with others. Um, find your tribe. See if you can find what you love and connect with others doing that thing. That really, when we look at the factors that lead to longevity, the lifestyle factors that lead to longevity, the actual number one biggest predictor of whether you will live a long time has to do with whether you have a strong social connection with others. And so this might not seem like a big deal, but it actually is. Okay, air pollution. If you can imagine, air pollution causes inflammation and oxidative stress. Again, similar pathophysiology, neurotoxicity. It causes vascular changes, and then it can increase your stress hormones, which, as we talked about, affect dementia and brain health. How to mitigate air pollution risk. Use air purifiers if possible. Maintain good ventilation. Having indoor plants can be helpful. Avoid smoking. Limit car use. Maintain your vehicles. Try to choose low emission products, so low VOC paints or cleaning products. Try to get outside if it's a non-pollution type day. And depending on where you live, that might be easier said than done. Or use face masks if you are going to be outside and it's not going to be a good day for that. Okay, and stress and dementia. You guys are doing great. Hang in there. Okay, so stress hormones. We talked about cortisol. So cortisol elevation in and of itself can damage the brain, including the hippocampus, which is the memory center, um, and causes actual brain structure changes. So when you look at people who are chronically stressed, the back part of the brain, kind of the reptilian part of the brain, um, the area where the fight or flight response is most prevalent is in the amygdala. And people who are chronically stressed, the amygdala gets bigger. And the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that acts um, uh, towards memory and reasoning, that part shrinks. And it's been shown that um, meditation, um, binaural beats meditation, mindfulness meditation, those increase the size of your hippocampus and decrease the size of the amygdala. And they've done these studies with like PET scans to be able to actually see that this happens. So I think that's pretty remarkable. Also, stress again, inflammation. So cortisol will increase inflammation and can disrupt your other neurotransmitters. And so, as we talked about, stress reduction techniques, so mindfulness and meditation, you're not doing it wrong. If you feel like you're not, if you feel like your mind is wandering, that's okay. That's normal. It wanders in everyone. Just bring it back to the breath. Yoga can be super helpful. Gardening, being out in nature, journaling. Journaling gives you kind of a sense of this meta awareness, gives you insight. It could be very therapeutic. And there's something called heart math. I put that in there. Heart math, I actually have it. I use it sometimes. It's a way to look at your heart rate variability while you are meditating, and it can help give you biofeedback for when you are kind of in that meditative zone. And that can be very, very helpful for managing stress and improving resilience. Okay, for traumatic brain injury, I didn't say a lot here because you can imagine that the direct trauma to the brain can cause the neurons to die, right? So that can be an obvious etiology for cognitive decline later on. And I actually think that my father probably had some of that as well because he was a professional soccer player and was a striker, and he had a lot of head injuries during his time playing. But what I found very interesting was that there are supplements that can be used to help improve uh, brain function and minimize traumatic brain injury symptoms. And those include omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, curcumin, magnesium, N-acetylcysteine, and creatine. Um, so these are kind of a um, basic supplements that I actually use every day. Curcumin is it's uh, what's found in, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. It the spice. I'll come back to it. If somebody wants to help me out, because I'm totally blanking on the name of the spice that curcumin is, the bright orange. Yeah. Anyway, magnesium I use every night, and acetylcysteine I take every day, creatine I use every single day, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids. Turmeric, turmeric, sorry. Curcumin is the ingredient in turmeric. So I try to put that in my smoothies. It's an anti-inflammatory and wonderful for decreasing inflammation in general, but also has been found to be helpful in traumatic brain injury. So this is a good list if you know anybody who has suffered from brain injury. Okay, diabetes and dementia. So diabetes is, it affects everything. If you think about when people have diabetic neuropathy, their nerves aren't working properly. Well, if you think of the brain, that is obviously going to be affected by diabetes. And uh, type 3 diabetes, which is, type 1 is kind of a genetic or autoimmune um, diabetes. Type 2 is we call a non-insulin diabetes. And then there's type 3 diabetes, which is basically the CNS manifestations, the central nervous system manifestations of diabetes. So diabetes definitely affects dementia in a huge way. Again, vascular damage, inflammation, oxidative stress, and increases directly amyloid plaques and tau tangles in the brain. So anything that we can do to minimize and reverse diabetes will improve our chances of having dementia later on. So again, what's the diabetes treatment? Unless unless you have autoimmune type 1 diabetes where your pancreas is completely shot, diet and exercise are the two huge factors that will move the needle. The other thing, interestingly, with brain health, decreasing sugars, especially in advanced Alzheimer's, can make a significant impact. So if you've ever heard of Eco Atkins, that's kind of a very low carbohydrate, high fat and protein diet, but it is by eco, meaning it is very vegetable centric. So we don't they don't use they don't have saturated fats from meats. It's like very plant based. That has been shown to be helpful in brain health as well, and trying to get into a ketotic state using that method. The other method as well, you can have it with using meat, but I like to minimize saturated fat intake because of LDL cholesterol's effects on the brain. So if somebody wants to do ketosis for Alzheimer's disease, it has been shown to make to have some improvements. So again, Eco Atkins. And then obviously exercise. Regular exercise decreases your blood sugar, which improves insulin sensitivity and improves brain health. Smoking, I mean, I think smoking kind of affects everything. Again, neurotoxicity, oxidative stress. It can increase amyloid plaques just by itself, reduce the oxygen supply. So increased carbon monoxide, which competes with oxygen. Inactivity, so not exercising. Again, same kinds of things, reduced blood flow, inflammation, oxidative stress, glucose metabolism is impaired, decreased neuroplasticity, and mental health. Mental health improves with activity, and that's been shown. So you can see how all of these things really tie together with a lot of very similar mechanisms. So why is aerobic activity good for brain health? Well, I mentioned before, high intensity interval training will increase your brain derived neurotrophic factor. So anything that increases lactic acid buildup actually also increases BDNF, interestingly. So any exercise that does that. Improves cerebral blood flow, decreases inflammation and oxidative stress, and enhances insulin sensitivity. But also resistance exercise, strength work improves, it stimulates insulin-like growth factor, which helps support brain cell growth and repair. Myokines, so these mediators in the muscle will help improve cognitive function. And also resistance work has been shown to be helpful with neurotransmitter levels such as serotonin and dopamine, which help with mood regulation. So once again, exercise is important overall. And flexibility and balance. We talked about stress reduction, the mind-body connection, and helps with sleep quality. Obviously, exercise, I can't stress enough the importance. Neurogenesis, it promotes formation of new neurons, which can help with neuroplasticity and mood and mental health, which we talked about. And second to last slide, biomarkers. So how do you know what your ApoE is? You can have that be tested through things like 23andMe, through those types of services, or we can do blood work to see. If you do have the ApoE44 variant, or if you're worried that you are finding yourself excessively forgetting, there are new profiles now. I don't know how insurance covers them. I looked up how much they cost. They're several $100s each. But if somebody is interested, there's an amyloid tau neurodegeneration profile and a p-tau 217 blood biomarker test that look at these early lab findings that can predate cognitive impairment. So you can actually see a rise in these labs before you actually see a significant cognitive impairment in people who then go on to develop worsening dementia. And so if we see that there's a rise, then this is something that can be then aggressively managed with like really doubling down on all the lifestyle factors that we talked about. So that's something kind of a take-home point for you guys. If you find that you want to be tested, just let me know. And that is all I have. same lifestyle factors for decreasing dementia that we need to be doing to improve our health overall. Lifestyle, super important. Okay. And I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, great. Yeah, let me see. No, stop. Sorry, guys. That is not what I want. I do not want to be screen sharing. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to get out of this. Stop share. Okay. All right. Get out of that. It is not letting me. Okay. Do I have any, do you guys have any questions? Can't get this, but I can hear you if you have any questions.
Hi, Kathy. This is Di. How are you?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Hey, good. So I loved this, and I've been thinking since I think the New York Times did an article a couple weeks ago about how alcohol is actually more dangerous than we thought.
Hmm.
Do you think that's a trend? Like they say, oh, keto's good, maybe keto's not so good. Alcohol moderation's okay. Oh, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Like, is it that, or do you really, I mean, because they're showing it strong links to cancer. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, I'm not a heavy drinker. Certainly don't drink daily. But the level they spoke about made me super paranoid about even
No,
really
no.
consuming. Right. And I know my general rule is moderation, but it seems so linked to so much of the other health things. I guess I'm just kind of curious what your take is on it.
Right. Yeah. So, and I've gone to so many conferences where people talk about this, and the bottom line is that the quote that I've heard time and time again is no amount of alcohol is safe. However, having said that, we also see that a lot of these countries and communities where people live to be over 100 will routinely have like a glass of wine during dinner. So I think that it can vary. There could be a genetic variability. Um, for me, I have tried to significantly reduce it to where I'll have some during, every once in a while making food or having dinner, but mostly try to save it for like dinner out or with hanging out with friends in a special, like for special occasions, um, just to minimize the risk. I can't say with certainty one way or the other, but I do know that enough people have, there's enough evidence out there. And with my positive family history, that I just want to decrease any risk that I have. So that's why I've made that decision. But, I don't think that they say less than 7 drinks a week for a woman and less than 14 a week for a man. I'm guessing this is probably just based on body size, but um, really for you,
That seems high, though, when you think about that.
well, in that case, I think you're fine. If you think seven seems high, then I think you're probably going to be okay. You know,
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering about like the cancer link and then all this other stuff, but maybe that's a different
there's
conversation.
and then so you have to balance that and then also the enjoyment aspect, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't, it'd be nice to live your life 100% perfectly, except it's not. And you have to decide, okay, where am I giving myself a little bit of a leeway? And if you're like, okay, I'm going to have a glass of wine with dinner with my friends, I would not lose sleep over that. Although you might. No, just sorry.
Fair. Thank you.
You're welcome. I saw Riley waving. Were you trying to say
Yep.
something or you're saying goodbye?
Uh, Goodbye. Thank you for doing
Okay,
this. This is very helpful and informative. Appreciate it.
sure, no problem. Take care. Anybody else have any questions before we hang up? All right. Well, thank you for joining me and be good to your brains. And if you have any questions, just shout them out in the chat. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.